video we will learn how to draw a transmembrane protein, starting with the most simple representation and working our way up to the more complicated representations. So we're going to start with a new window, a new document, and we're going to first create the lipid bilayer. So I'm going to draw a horizontal line, and I'm going to use a custom built brush that I've created in another video. And if you want to know how to draw this particular lipid bilayer, you can refer to that video and it'll describe that in detail. Right now we're going to focus just on the protein itself. So I'm going to zoom in and I'm going to create the alpha helix. So to do that, I'm going to use the ellipse tool. I'm going to create a little ellipse like that, maybe a little smaller. So to draw the ellipse, you click on the ellipse tool. If you don't see it over here, then click on window and click on toolbar and click on advanced. I like the advanced because it gives me all the options available here. And you might see a square up on this icon. Just click and hold with the left mouse button, then move down to the ellipse tool. And then draw a ellipse. Looks about like that. That doesn't have to be exact. So I'm going to copy this ellipse by holding the Alt key. So you'll see that little white arrow that pops, that shows up just below my mouse pointer. So I'm going to click with my left mouse button and hold my left mouse button as I drag it down. And you'll see that little magenta line that indicates that I'm aligned with the ellipse on the top side of the membrane. So I'm going to release on my left mouse button first, and then I will release on the Alt button. Next thing I want to do is draw a square, or really a rectangle. So I click on the rectangle tool, and I'm going to position my mouse till I see an anchor, the word anchor, on just above the pointer. So I'm going to click and hold and go all the way down till I see the anchor again. Okay, that's going to be the shaft of the alpha helix. So right now what we're doing is we're creating the cylinder of where we're going to represent the alpha helix with just a very simple cylinder. So we're just creating all those components. And then we're going to use the shape builder tool, which is right here. First we're going to select everything. So we click and drag using the area select tool, with the selection tool, and then we click and drag, so that uses area select function of that tool. So now we have everything selected, but I don't want to select this lipid bilayer. So I'm going to hold the shift key down and then click with my left mouse button, and that's going to unselect the lipid bilayer. So now I only have these components selected. So now I'm going to use the shape builder tool. So whenever I have the shape builder tool, I can move my mouse cursor over the shape, and you'll see that it'll shade specific regions of that collection of shapes that I've selected. And so I can use this to merge certain areas. So I can click with my left mouse button and drag it one area down, and it will combine these areas here. I can do the same thing down on the other side. I can click and then I can drag downward, and that will combine those regions. And so now I have what looks to be a cylinder. And the cylinder would be tilted in a way, the top portion would be tilted towards you, because you can see the top of the cylinder but you can't see the bottom. Okay, so that's the beginning of our alpha helix. And so now we're going to color it. I'm going to select, first I'm going to select just the shaft portion, and I'm going to color it red. That seems like a reasonable color. And then I'm going to color the top. I'm going to color it with a lighter color. But first, let me click the same color as this one, and I'm going to use the color guide, which is over here on the top right. Now, if you don't see this little pinwheel looking thing that whenever you put your mouse over it says color guide. You have to go up to Window and then go down to Color Guide and click on that, and you'll see a window that pops up. You just drag it over until it merges with the menu on the right. So I'm just going to click on that, and now it gives you several options to pick from of different tints and shades. I'm going to pick a lighter tint, okay, maybe something like that, so that it looks lighter. This would be what you would see if maybe the light source is on the top of the cylinder. Okay, and we're not going to do any shading on this stage because I'm showing you a very simple representation. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this. So I'm going to select the two items. I'm going to hold the Alt key till I see the little arrow that shows up. Click and hold my left mouse button and then drag it over, and then release my left mouse button. So now I have two alpha helices. And then I'm going to draw the loop portions of this alpha helix. So I'm going to use the pencil tool. I'm going to remove the fill, so now I just have a black line. I'm going to draw this line till it goes like that. And then now I'm going to start in the center of this ellipse. I'm going to make it a little irregular line. And then I'm going to the center of this other ellipse. So now I'm going to draw another line this way. Okay. I'm going to draw a loop this way. I'm going to put two arrows right here. So I don't need this to be exact, but I'm just going to get things started. Okay, so now I want to draw the two arrows for the beta sheet. So we now have the alpha helix with the loop regions, and now I want to draw the beta sheet. So the way to do that, well, there's a couple ways of doing it, but the easiest way would be to draw a vertical line, okay, and make it a particularly thick vertical line by increasing the stroke size, maybe something like that. And then I'm going to add an arrow. So I'm going to go over here to this appearance icon over here. And if you don't see the appearance icon, again, go up to Window and go down to Appearance. You see a window that pops up, drag it over. So I'm going to click on the appearance. I'm going to click on Stroke. And then I'm going to go down here to Arrows. And there's a whole number of different arrows that you might select, but I think the best one's probably this one. Now you see it's really large. That's because we have a very large font size. We need to bring it down. So here's how you can scale the arrow. So I'm going to type in, I don't know, 20. I'm just going to click away over here. So now that looks pretty good. And then I'm going to expand this arrow. So I'm going to go up here, click on Object, Expand Appearance. Okay. And then so now what it did is it created a line and then a triangle. Okay, I want the line to also be a fill, so I'm going to double click on this. So first of all, let me just ungroup it. So I'm going to hold Shift, then hold Control, and then press G. That's going to ungroup it. So now I can just select on that line, and I'm going to go up here to Object. I'm going to expand it. Fill and Stroke. Say OK. So now it turns it into a rectangle. So I'm going to highlight both of these, and now I want to again merge these different areas into one object. So I'm going to use the Shape Builder tool again. I'm going to click with my left mouse button on the top, and then I'm just going to draw that line downwards and then release. And so now that creates the arrow. Then now I want to color this the same color as up here. You can use the eyedropper tool by clicking I, and then I click with my left mouse button on this alpha helix. So now it looks the same. And I'm going to rotate it till it's about the right angle. So something like that. And then I'm going to hold the Alt key and then click with my left mouse button to copy it. So now I want to rotate it so that it's in the opposite direction, because these beta sheets go in separate directions and they follow the peptide. So I want to rotate it around. So I'm going to hold the shift key and then rotate it. So now I'm in the opposite orientation. Okay. Then I can position these. One way of changing these lines, you can move it over, that works too, or you can use your pencil tool and then draw it to correct it. Okay, but you have to have the line selected in order for that to work. So see, I have this line selected. Click over the pencil tool, and now I can correct. Okay, and I'm going to click on the direct selection, and there you go. There's the first very simple representation of a protein. The next thing we can do, this representation is fine. I think it works really well, and it's very clear everything, every aspect of this protein that you're trying to convey. But you may want to make it look a little fancier and have a little bit of a more three-dimensional appearance to it. So let's copy this. So I'm going to select all those objects. I'm going to hold Shift and click on the membrane to unselect it. And now I'm going to copy this by holding the Alt key, dragging it over. Okay. And now I'm going to hold the space key to give the pan mode, left mouse button to move it over. Okay, so there's a couple things we want to do. First, we want to add a gradient to these alpha helices so that it looks a little more three-dimensional. So I'm going to click on this alpha helix, just the shaft portion, then hold Shift and click on this alpha helix, and now I'm going to add a linear gradient to it. So I'm going to go over here to gradient, and if you don't see it, then you click up on window and you click on gradient. A window will pop up, you drag it over. So I'm going to click on gradient, and I'm going to click, make sure you see you have this fill portion on the top side of these two items. So what's on here the right is the outline or the stroke, and what's on the left is the fill. So make sure the fill looks over as overlaying the stroke. So if I click over here, then this is going to modify the stroke. So I want to definitely click on this so that I modify the fill. So I'm going to click linear gradient. Now the default is from white to black, but we can change that. So we just go down to this little circle, double click, and move, and then click on red. Okay, and that adds the gradient, and you can play around with these properties to make it look the way you want. For instance, if I want to add maybe a lighter hue to this color, then I can change it to red, then go up to color, and then maybe I can change this to HSV or HSB. That sometimes that's a little easier, so that you can move to more lighter colors. And I can move it over so that it gives it a little more of a soft appearance to that that red. Okay, so that looks good. And we don't need to color the top because it's a flat surface, so it's not going to have any gradient. Okay, the next thing we might want to do is we might want to have this curve, these arrows curve a bit. So let's try to do that. So I'm going to select those two items. I'm going to rotate them. Okay. Actually, I want them to be perfectly vertical. It looks like they're not going to, so let's just make sure that they are just easier to work with whenever they're perfectly vertical. Okay, and let's move this down so that it looks like that. And now what I want to do is I want to make it curve. I want to add a kind of a three-dimensional curve. So I'm going to highlight both objects. I'm going to go up to Object, and then I'm going to go down to Envelope Distort, and I'm going to click on Make with Mesh. And this will add a mesh on here that I can move the different points to warp this object the way that I want. What I want to do is I want to add just two, just for simplicity. so that it's a 2 by 2 grid. Say OK. And now I can modify the different points. And this kind of takes it's a little bit of an art. Maybe we can move it over to the line so we have an indication of where we're at. And so I'm just going to use the direct selection tool to modify these lines accordingly. Now it's going to look ugly at first, but you just have to have some patience. Okay. And we want to make sure we change these handles. Now you want these handles to be in line with the orientation that you are looking for. So it is important. So for instance, if you want this to curve this way, you want these handles to be in line with that. And the same thing with this handle. If it's curving down, you want that handle to be curving down. And so keep in mind that the position of this point is important. So if I pull it this way, it's going to stretch everything that way. The relative size of this grid is important. If it's small over here and large down on the bottom side, then it's going to stretch everything accordingly, and you don't want that to happen. So that's okay. Like I said, it's not always easy, but it can be done. Now the curvature of a beta sheet is not, it's not a very strong curvature, so you don't want to have too much of a curve, just enough to show that it's actually curving. So if you notice that this is a little more narrow than that, we want to bring it down. Actually, maybe what we'll do is widen this out a little bit. Okay. I don't know, you get the idea. Okay, we're going to move the lines accordingly. We're going to move them so that it matches, so that it goes to the out from the tip of the arrow and then into the base of the arrow. I'm going to use the pencil tool. So I've selected this line here, and I'm going to finish drawing it so that it goes accordingly. And now, since we have a shade up here, we want to apply a similar shade to the beta sheet. And so to do that, I need to click on the object, and then I'm going to go up here on the left, and you can see it says edit envelope or edit content. So if I click on this, what this is going to do is actually modify the arrow itself. And so I want to do that. I want to add a little gradient to it. So I'm going to click over here to gradient. click linear. I'm going to change this to, I guess, about 45. Okay, I want to reverse this. Okay, that didn't reverse it at all. Actually, I want to add a darker red on this side and a red on this side. So actually, I want this to be the same red hue and darkness as the one on the right. I'm going to add a little bit of a glare and to kind of show that color. And I want it to be at a 45-degree angle. So I click over here and I type in 45. So I'm going to say OK, or I'm going to click away so that it applies that change. And so now we have this thing that's popping up, and I don't want to see it. What the heck is, no. Okay, sorry about that. Unbelievable. Okay. So now that is another or a little more detailed representation of a transmembrane protein. The next stage would be to add the actual alpha helix itself. So I'm going to select this again and then just copy it over. And I'm going to replace these alpha helices with actual helical structure. So, and again, what's in the center is a fine representation of a protein. We're just going to more detailed representations. So to do the alpha helix, I'm going to draw a line about, let's actually draw it over the membrane so that we can see. So I'm going to click and then I'm going to hold the shift button so that it keeps it vertical. Release on the left mouse button, then release shift, and now I'm going to add a zigzag to this line. So I'm going to click on the direct selection tool just so that I'm modifying the line itself. Go up here to effects, then go down to distort transform, and then down to zigzag. So that adds a zigzag to that line. I want it to be smooth. Let's put 8 copies. Okay, and let's make this particularly large. Let's see, something like that. Actually, let's move down to 7. You're going to change these numbers to get about what you want. That looks fine to me, so okay. Now I'm going to copy this line, drag it upwards, and let's do something like that. Let's make it halfway, so let's make it to where each ridge is half of the ridge of the other. So what I mean by that is this will be perfectly aligned, but then we're going to click upwards until that the second zigzag line is right in between the notches of the other. Okay, so that looks good there. Now I'm going to highlight those two objects, and then I'm going to let's drag it upwards so that now we have the size that we want. And now I'm going to click Object, Expand Appearance, and that's going to change these into an individual line. See, before it was a line that had the appearance of zigzag, so it didn't actually modify anything. And then I expanded it so that the line actually curves along that path. Now, one thing I forgot to do, let me hold Control and press Z to change it back into the line. Now I'm going to make a copy of this and hold it over there. Just in case I make a mistake, I can always go back and modify this instead of having to start from scratch. Okay, so I'm going to now highlight this, and then I'm going to click Object, Expand Appearance, just like I did before. And then now we have it's all expanded, and this line follows that curved path. Okay, so let me select it again, and now I'm going to use the pencil tool, the pen tool. Clicking on the pen, that should be already as a default sitting on top. If not, you click and hold, and you should see the pen that shows up. Now it shouldn't have a plus or any minus. Those are useful tools. We're just not going to use them right now. And then now I'm just going to go along and click with a single click at each of these points. Now one thing that I forgot to mention is what you should do is click on the direct selection tool, then click on the pen tool. And the reason why I want you to do that is when you hold the control key, it changes the tool to the previous tool that you had clicked on or that you had used. So this is useful so that I can click away and unselect that object, so that I can go back here and now draw a new line, then hold the control and then click again. So it's just a very fast way of unselecting the object that you previously did. And I need to be careful here because, actually no, not at this stage. Okay, so I'm gonna go along here. And connecting these lines. You'll see why I'm doing this later. Okay. Okay, so, and then, oh, I need one more line. Okay. All right, so now you can start to see the beginnings of the alpha helix, but we want these portions here to overlay the other portions. We want to see that some overlap, and we need to get rid of these lines here. So to do that, we'll do like we did before and use the shape builder tool. So I'm going to click on the shape builder tool. And it's important that you know the handedness of alpha helices. So alpha helices, they'll start behind and they'll go up and around, and then behind, up and around, and behind, where the overlaying portion starts low on the left and then goes up to the right. So that's important. It'll look strange if you do it the other way. You won't really know why it looks strange, but it will. And so you're just going to click along. Okay. All right, so now you can definitely start to see the alpha helix. Now, alpha helices, they'll usually start in the center, at least that's how they're depicted. So we want to use the eraser. And notice that whenever I click on the eraser, you might see a circle or some other object, but right now we just see a line. I like using the line when I use the eraser. Let me click enter. And we wanted the eraser to be vertical. So I'm going to type 90. Okay, and you want the roundedness to be 0. I think I'm going to make this a little smaller and say okay. Now, because I have this object selected, I'm going to be allowed to erase portions of it. Now, if I didn't have it selected, I wouldn't be erasing anything at all at this point. So it's important to have the object that you want to erase selected. So you're going to click away. And so now you start to really see that alpha helix. Okay, so we need to color these different portions. So I'm going to select, first let's select all of them. And then I'm going to change it to red by changing the swatch, which is over here. And then I'm going to make the overlaying helices portions a little bit lighter. So I'm going to go up to the color guide and I'm going to click that lighter hue. So now you can really see the alpha helix. Okay, let's replace these cylindrical alpha helices. Let's group this by selecting all the objects, holding Control and press G. So now everything's grouped. Now I'm going to move it over. Okay, let me copy this by holding the Alt key and dragging. Okay, and let's redraw these lines using the pencil tool. And there you go. So that is a alpha helix structure as opposed to a cylinder. And the next step would be to apply a gradient. So let me copy this and apply that gradient. So you can see how that's done. And it's pretty simple. I'm just going to click on, let me ungroup it now. Well, actually, I don't really need to do that. What I can do is just use the direct selection tool. Then I'm holding the shift key. I'm selecting all the overlaying portions. Then I'm going to go over here to gradient, and I'm going to let me click on the linear gradient, and then this is going to apply the previous gradient that I had applied to the cylinder. And so now you have a shaded, or using the gradient tool, applied a shade to the alpha helix. And so this is 4 different ways you can represent a transmembrane protein. I think the one on the left is just fine. It looks great. It looks good. But also sometimes it's nice to see something that is depicted over on the right. And you might ask, okay, why do I want to draw the protein? Why not just copy over an image of the actual structure? And you could do that, and it would look fine. But sometimes we want a little bit more artistic liberty to highlight different portions of the protein, and that might be a little difficult to do if you're using a raster image.